Live from Quito, Ecuador. I'm Sweeney Gray, and this is from the South, the Midday News Brief from Tell Us Your English. And we start this new edition right now. Colombia is celebrating the first anniversary of its landmark peace deal with the FARC rebels, which puts an end to 53 years of armed conflict that left 260,000 people dead and many missing. Exactly 1 year after President Juan Manuel Santos and the leaders of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia signed a peace deal in Havana, Santos says he is satisfied with its implementation, but the FARC and some social movements accuse the government of failing to keep all of its promises.
Lograrlo fue difícil.
The peace agreement was difficult to achieve, very difficult, but silencing the guns has allowed us to save lives, thousands of lives. An independent study by Notre Dame University in the United States, the institution chosen by both parts to verify the process, has compared 34 peace processes around the world and concluded that ours, the Colombian one, is one of the best designed, one of the most complete, and its advances after 1 year have been faster than any other peace processes.
This day, the first anniversary of the signing of the peace deal, should be a moment for a national clamor, to promote a huge mobilization of Colombians to ensure that what was agreed is genuinely respected without mockery.
Sin burlas, lo pactado.
A report documenting the first year of implementation of the Colombian peace agreement has been released by the Foundation for Peace and Reconciliation and the Citizens Initiative Union for Peace. It warns of a difficult situation surrounding the implementation of the deal, and we have more details in the next story.
The signing of the peace agreement marked the end of the war between the FARC and the Colombian state, an initiative that avoided the deaths of over 4,000 Colombians in the last year, who would have lost their lives as a result of the armed conflict.
The war, as we understood it, as an armed conflict, is over, and the FARC fulfilled the dropping of arms. It's the only process in the world that has given in more arms than rebels. The average is 1.3 arms per rebel.
Nevertheless, the reports after the first year of implementation of the peace agreement is negative. Out of the 68 laws that should have been approved, the national government only presented 24 to the Congress. Only 10 of those have been approved, and there's a week left after the fast-track mechanism ends. In other aspects, the landscape is not promising either. Civil organizations are warning that the post-conflict peace process is at risk.
Will it be a post-conflict with high rates of violence or with minor rates of violence? With reduction of violence? That's the first question. Second question is, will it be a post-conflict with important changes, especially for those territories that suffer war, social changes, political changes, changes in the construction of their citizenship, with the state presence there? And third question is, how much, how quick, how hard will the reconciliation process be? Or will we just continue this division process in the country?
Other questions contribute to this uncertainty. Several of the key aspects of the peace agreement were downgraded during the legal process. A central example of this is the political reform that's seen as a counter-reform, and the special jurisdiction for peace that was split with the exclusion of third-party civilians and the members of the Colombian state linked to the armed conflict.
It is an immoral and shameful decision that will bring deep international concern, as they protect these bad Colombians with a guarantee of immunity. Those who actively contributed to feeding this war.
The picture of reincorporation of former rebels into civil life is also a concern. Since the signing of the peace agreement, 31 former rebels have been killed. Legal and socioeconomic security is also absent.
When it comes to judicial security, 1,600 rebels are still in jail because of the weakness of the amnesty. In the socioeconomic reincorporation, only 3 productive projects were approved for over 12,000 rebels. And when it comes to the political security, the Congress is setting it back.
In 2017, the number of homicides has grown in 123 municipalities. The same territories that once the FARC left were occupied by illegal armed groups, heirs of the paramilitaries. Colombians maintain hope, but inaction over the implementation of the peace agreement is risking any possibility of peace in Colombia.
And here's our correspondent in Colombia, Lorena Hoyos, with all the details.
Today, it's 1 year since the signing of the peace agreement, and different social sectors have called for commemorations. This event took place in Colón's Theatre in Bogotá's Old Town, the same setting where, just 1 year ago, the signing of the peace agreement was revealed. The meeting was led by Juan Manuel Santos and leaders of the FARC political party. Both leaders met 1 year on after signing the peace accord, which at the time was met with high anticipation. People were able to think that peace in Colombia was possible. And despite everything that's happened this year with the murders of social leaders, murders of former guerrilla fighters, and the destabilization of that very accord, people here are still holding on to that same hope. President Santos delivered his speech first. He said that the purpose of the peace agreement was saving the life of Colombians who would have died and lost their lives in the ongoing armed conflict. And so he said that they're already achieving that and that the process was worth it. He also spoke about the implementation of the peace agreement, and he did recognize that there have been many obstacles and time breaches. But besides that, he said they've been moving forward and highlighted that there hasn't been any default on the part of the Colombian state. Let's remember that there have been continued complaints from citizens claiming a non-fulfillment according to the time agreements, and that the government has actually been changing what they've already agreed to 1 year ago.
Lorena Hoyos there. Russia and Venezuela have signed a series of cooperation agreements in areas of strategic interest for both countries. The agreements signed in the southern Russian city of Sochi cover education and technology, as well as projects to develop mining in the Orinoco region of Venezuela. The Venezuelan Minister of Ecological Mining singled out Russia's interest in gold and diamond mining.
These are our first approaches to the Russian government, and they are very interested in taking part in the mining projects we have, especially for gold and diamonds in the Orinoco mining area. The most interesting is the diamond mining, with the Russian Alrosa company, which accounts for 40% of the world's distribution of this mineral. We expect the company to make a first visit early next year to look at the possibility of setting up a joint venture with Venezuela to mine for diamonds. And there are other companies that are very interested in possible gold mining.
Our correspondent in Moscow, Hansel Oro, sent this report.
Different agreements were signed today at the Russia-Venezuela High Commission meeting. Among them are the exchange of intellectual information between nations, the expansion of wheat trade, and the interest of Russia companies in the exploitation of diamonds in the Venezuelan Orinoco mining area. This strategic alliance will help Venezuela to confront the economic war and sanctions imposed by the United States.
Bolivia has signed a new energy agreement with Russia's Gazprom company during the 4th Gas Exporting Countries Forum in Santa Cruz. Gazprom will work on the exploration and exploitation of natural resources in 2 major regions of Bolivia and cooperate with the commercialization of liquefied gas, as announced by the Minister of Energy, Luis Alberto Sanchez. Also in Bolivia, massive rallies were held in support of new legislation that would allow for the re-election of President Evo Morales, having already run for re-election once before. The people are asking Bolivia's constitutional court to overturn a law that allows elected officials to be re-elected once. Our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales, has all the details.
Rallies by social sectors who support the government took place on Friday. They seek the approval needed for President Evo Morales to run for re-election in the upcoming 2019 general elections. The massive rallies were held in Tarija, in the south of the country, and in Oruro, in the Bolivian highlands. The rallies were convened by social organizations who support the government, and over the past few weeks they were joined by other grassroots institutions. Rallies such as these have taken place in all 9 departments of Bolivia, and it was announced that they will culminate in the city of Sucre, where the headquarters of the Constitutional Court are located. The court must resolve a lawsuit by a group of legislators who have asked that current provisions, which limit elected officials to only run for re-election once, be overturned. In President Evo Morales' case, he has already run for re-election before, which is why now people are seeking that indefinite re-elections be instituted, not just for the role of president, but also for oppositions that are chosen by electoral process, such as mayors and governors. The Constitutional Court will answer this lawsuit before the start of the judicial recess, which starts in mid-December.
On Thursday, residents of Beetham Gardens in Trinidad burned tires on the highway that lines their community, causing traffic gridlock after 2 community leaders were taken in by police for questioning. The men were released hours later, but some cars were damaged by people throwing stones or trying to rob them. Prime Minister Keith Rowley held a press conference earlier to discuss the unrest.
I heard this morning one former national security minister saying that the government should put a police post in the Beetham and one in Sealots and one in so and so. That may sound good, but that cannot be the overriding solution. Where there is need and where we can afford to do it, but we cannot take the position that we will put a police post on every street corner. What I am talking about is law enforcement across the board, from St. Clair to Cedros, from Enterprise to Beetham, because that is how it has to be.
And we have more news in a minute, so stay with us. Ecuador's former president, Rafael Correa, is due to arrive back in the country later on Friday. It will be his first visit since he moved to Belgium to be with his family after stepping down in May. And it comes as the ruling party is deeply divided between his supporters and those of the current president, Lenin Moreno.
Once again, Esmeraldas will be the headquarters of the 7th National Convention of the País Alliance Party. Its president for life, Rafael Correa, explained his reasons to return.
We've had 6 months of government, 6 months of sabotage that is destroying the citizens' revolution. Destroying Rafael Correa, Jorge Glass. 6 months of pacts with the worst of the party.
Members confirmed the topics that were up for debate.
First, we're going to pick our authorities with a new structure for our commissions. And we will decide new militant terms so that anybody that doesn't behave must leave País Alliance.
According to experts, Correa's return and his participation at the National Congress represents a substantial change that may be reflected in the removal of some of their members and the reorientation of País Alliance.
With former President Correa's arrival, well, he has a strong image. He has a legitimacy as a symbol of a leader, and he also has a legal representation because according to País Alliance's statutes, he is a lifetime president.
The ruling party's division became evident when President Lenin Moreno, along with a small fraction of País Alliance, called for last-minute meetings at the same time as the National Convention.
Well, I received a call for a meeting from the National Board, the so-called National Board. I already said that I won't participate because I don't recognize it. It's illegitimate because Mr. Lenin Moreno is not the president of País Alliance.
Another one of the arguments against Lenin Moreno, according to the National Board and some of its members, is that besides taking the ideological principles, he also took the presidency.
And on the day that Rafael Correa is due to return to Ecuador, a trial hearing has begun in the case of the country's vice president, Jorge Glass, who's accused of criminal association in connection with the Odebrecht corruption scandal. My colleague, Carla Gonzalez, joins us now live. Hi, Carla. Thank you for joining us. What stage is this legal case against Jorge Glass at now?
Yes, so today the hearing against Jorge Glass began. He was present at the court. This is the first phase of this trial where Attorney General Carlos Baca present the initial arguments against Glass. The second phase will be to actually present the evidence. He says link Glass to a ring of corruption inside Odebrecht. The third phase will be the closing arguments and the final ruling on whether Glass will face jail time. In Ecuadorian law, if someone is found guilty on criminal association, he will face from 3 to 5 years in prison. Of course, yesterday, Eduardo Franco, the lawyer of Jorge Glass, presented a case against 2 of the judges from the National Court of Justice, saying that they have conflict of interest in this case against Glass. Let's remember that Glass faces an accusation that he was part of this ring of corruption that Odebrecht allegedly had paid more than 33 million for government officials that were part of this ring to give them contracts with the government.
And Carla, what do we expect to happen when former President Rafael Correa arrives back into Ecuador this very evening?
Yes, so President Correa was called, former President Correa, by the National Directorate of Alianza País to come and be part of this national convention and to see the reconstruction of the Alianza País party. He, of course, has been very strict on Moreno, has said that he has become a traitor, that he is not part of the Citizens' Revolution, and he is working against the social and economic advancements that he and his government have done for the past 10 years. So we are expecting an even stronger division inside Alianza País with also the national conventions, 2 different national conventions that could happen side by side.
Thank you so much for that. We've been chatting to my correspondent, Carla Gonzalez, about the return of President Rafael Correa to Ecuador and the struggles within the País Alliance Party. Other news now. And today marks the 20th anniversary of the decriminalization of homosexuality in Ecuador. 20 years ago in Ecuador, an LGBTI person could be condemned for up to 8 years just for having a consensual same-sex relationship. The LGBTI organizations will hold several events on Friday and Saturday in different Ecuadorian cities to commemorate those who died in the struggle to decriminalize sexual diversity and reaffirm the need to continue to work for more rights and inclusion. Confusion still surrounds the fate of the 44 crew members of the Argentinian submarine that disappeared over a week ago. On Thursday, the Navy said the submarine may have exploded, but refused to confirm that the crew were dead. The mothers of Plaza de Mayo have shown their solidarity with the families.
We, the mothers of Plaza de Mayo, want to send the families of the submarine crew members all of our love. We know the pain and anguish you are all going through. We send you all of our compassion.
A crew of Russian Navy specialists has joined the search operation as hope fade of finding the submarine. The team has an unmanned underwater remote control device called Panther Plus, as well as deep-sea divers and a doctor from the Russian Navy. Our correspondent, Edgardo Esteban, has the latest from Buenos Aires.
This is the 9th day of the disappearance of the Ara San Juan submarine on the Austral Argentinian Sea. This search is being moved forward with the international collaboration of over 4,000 officials who have the task of finding it. But the uncertainty continues. There's no indication yet on where it is, and the hypothesis on the reasons of the disappearance are still generating and multiplying. But the truth is that there was a call on Wednesday the 15th, which after a few hours an explosion was detected. And now, after 9 days, President Mauricio Macri has made statements about the situation, after the government went silent about this and its political cost. But today, Macri finally went to the Liberty Building, the headquarters of the Argentinian Navy, to meet with its highest officials and to be updated about the situation. He also reiterated the searches will continue until the submarine is found, and he also expressed his respects to the families. But this is a really complex and difficult situation, with tension and political costs. because changes in the army are expected, particularly in the Navy, and the changes from the Defense Ministry after this complicated situation. Because there's still no concrete investigations about how this happened, its conditions, and if it was suitable for sailing, and how this explosion happened, if it was one. A battery complication, or maybe because of other reasons, which needs to be investigated after it's found. But these are all speculations, and we have to wait.
We thank Edgardo Esteban for that report. The countdown to elections in Honduras is coming to an end, but just 2 days ahead of the poll, the International Forum of Political Parties, which is also being held in the country, has denounced the harassment by the Honduran authorities against its delegates. Let's take a look at the details in this report.
Honduras will have general elections soon, but the annual summit of political parties of Latin America and the Caribbean is taking place this week. Delegates from this organization claim that at their arrival, they were arrested, interrogated, and treated with hostility by local authorities. They say that in 34 years of the existence of the organization, this is the first time they've been mistreated.
Democracy in Honduras is fragile, and us, as political parties, are worried about the fragility of Honduran democracy.
These are renowned academics from the continent and political representatives. For the first time, they would meet counterparts from Asia and Africa, but the Africans were excluded as they were denied the access to Honduras.
Even when they had diplomatic passports, the members of those countries, they weren't allowed in.
Human rights and freedom of speech organizations reported the exclusion and also presented reports of hostility towards journalists who are in the country for the electoral coverage.
They are intimidating, and that's why a historic electoral process will be happening in a country like Honduras, where freedom and democracy are at stake.
Hondurans will decide on Sunday who will be the next president. They hope the election day goes smoothly without any repression.
Cuba is preparing to commemorate the first anniversary of the death of Fidel Castro on Saturday. Ceremonies marking the anniversary are scheduled across the Caribbean island. President Rafael Castro will lead the ceremony in the southeastern city of Santiago de Cuba, where his brother's ashes are interred. He passed away on November 25 last year at the age of 90, but Fidel remains very much present in the minds of Cubans.
I remember Fidel with much sadness. My eyes water because it seems that he is still alive. Everyone says, I am Fidel, I am Fidel. Well, I am Fidel too.
Yo soy Fidel.
Women from around Latin America and the Caribbean are continuing with their 14th feminist meeting in Uruguay under the slogan Diversity but not Dispersion. They are discussing racism, discrimination, gender violence, and a feminist version of the indigenous concept of good living, among other issues. The conference ends this Saturday with a big march for the Day Against Violence Against Women. Among those taking place is the niece of the Maribel sisters, whose murder in the Dominican Republic inspired the day. Brazilian indigenous groups have arrived in the capital to call for the Attorney General to revoke the new land ownership legislation signed for by President Michel Temer. According to the protesters, this is another attempt by the government to win support from members of Congress who represent the big landowners.
They are creating unconstitutional laws and using them to penalize indigenous communities in order to take land from us.
They want to destroy our land, to transform it into a huge plantation and raise cattle. This is why they want to get rid of us and take away everything we have.
We'll be back very soon, so stay with us. Now, let's take a look at some of the stories that are making headlines in the other parts of the world.
At least 235 people have been killed in an attack on a mosque in Sinai in Egypt. The attackers set off a bomb and opened fire on people as they prayed. According to local media, over 125 others were injured in the attack. No group has claimed responsibility for the assault. Emerson Mnangagwa has been sworn in as Zimbabwe's new president. Mnangagwa vowed sweeping changes and pledged to fight poverty and corruption after Robert Mugabe's shock resignation. In his inauguration address, Mnangagwa paid tribute to Mugabe, saying that the 93-year-old was the country's last remaining founding father. The new president's supporters turned out in droves and expressed their hopes for change.
We look forward to a unity government, an inclusive government where we have everybody coming in, every technocrat, despite who you are. We're not looking at race, we're not looking at party, theology or philosophy or whatever. We are looking at a new Zimbabwe where we get united and move forward as a nation.
South Africa's Supreme Court has increased Oscar Pistorius' murder sentence to 13 years and 5 months after the state argued that his original sentence of 6 years was shockingly lenient. Pistorius was imprisoned in July of 2016 after being found guilty on appeal of murdering girlfriend Reva Stenkamp on Valentine's Day in 2013. The National Prosecution Authority hopes the victim's family will find closure.
We further believe that this decision by the Supreme Court of Appeal will assist the family in finding closure, although we know that the sentence will not bring back their daughter, but it will, we hope it will facilitate closure in knowing that an appropriate sentence has been imposed.
Over 500 Amazon workers in Italy and Germany are on strike during one of the busiest shopping days of the year. This is the first ever strike over pay at Amazon's warehouse located near Milan, Italy, which employs 4,000 people. In a statement, the Verdi trade union said the employees are under too much pressure to do more in less time.
We've come to the end of this midday news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, telesturtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Sonia Gray. Thank you so much for watching.